Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. I'm your host Terry, coming to you from the back porch. Um, it's Sunday. What's the date today? I don't even know what the date today is. I got no idea. It's getting close to Halloween because I already bought Santa Claus Diet Coke at Walmart yesterday. Anyway, hey, so I wanted to talk to my buddy Lyle is doing a live about talking about Indian people laying low and stuff, but because there keeps stupidity keeps rearing its ugly head, and I wanted to talk about that because there's a lot of like demagoguery going on about this subject of ELP, English language proficiency, driver's license being issued by certain states. Although I got to tell you, every single state has issued a driver's license to some CMV driver, and it's probably been the wrong move. And it's kind of funny because you could tell what the party of a politician is by the state that they call out for issuing licenses to somebody that's maybe not, that wasn't domiciled here, which by the way, it was legal. And the other problem with all of this driver's licensure stuff, and I guess I'll start with the thing I was going to talk about last, but I'll talk about it first. So some congressman with a few other people, and they're all Republicans, have signed on to this bill to make English language proficiency testing mandatory before anybody gets or renews a license. And OIDA has come out against this proposed legislation because they're like, why should somebody that's been driving for 40 years have to take an ELP test? And my response to that is, why shouldn't they? Just because they've had a license for 40 years doesn't mean they can read. Doesn't mean they can read road signs. I passed a guy one time on 81 driving a semi, and this dude must have been like 85 years old. And he was driving a semi like you see old people driving cars. And I say that I'm 63, so I'm probably considered old by a lot of people. But I was like, man, dude, you just need to get off the road, And I'd be like, look, you got to take a test when you renew your license. Okay, fine. You got to take a physical every 2 years. People do that all the time and nobody says anything. And there could be a way that you could, I don't know, take the test, and like in Maryland, they offer license renewal a year ahead of when your license expires. So I don't know, I've said this about ELP. I see people that I pretty much presume speak English just by looking at them, although I know that's kind of prejudging. But they still go until the lane basically ends, where there have been signs for like miles saying the right lane ends, and then literally when they see the line coming across, then they're like, oh yeah, I guess I gotta move to the left. I mean, it happens all the time. Look at construction zones. There are construction zones all over the U.S. that tell trucks to be in one lane or the other. Oftentimes they tell them to be in the left lane. And I've talked about this in the past. And I came through Zanesville, Ohio the other day, and it's been like this on I-70 in Zanesville for a long time. Trucks, and there are at least 3 signs leading into that construction area. Trucks, have to be in the left lane. Follow through and see how many trucks don't get in the left lane. And it can't all be people that don't speak English, but it can all be people that don't read road signs. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. I don't really care. If I had to take a test every time I renewed my license, I don't care. If I really want to renew my CMV that much, or my CDL that much, I should say, then I'll do it. All right. By the way, Iowa Hawkeyes retained the Floyd of Rosedale Trophy yesterday by beating Minnesota. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of accidents that have happened. And one of them that's getting a lot of attention is an accident that happened the other day on I-10 in wherever the I-10, I-15 intersection is in Southern Cal. I don't know if that's considered Fontana or where. It's not Colton, might be Rancho Cucamonga. But anyway, this dude by the name of Jashanpreet Singh, so the name Singh, S-I-N-G-H, is ubiquitous in trucking, but the San Bernardino County Sheriffs broke up a theft ring, a cargo theft ring. They call the Singh group or gang, and they had like 15 defendants named, and all 14 of the defendants had the name Singh in their name somewhere, either their last name or their middle name. And then there was like one dude, like Juan Hernandez, and I was like, he probably was just delivering some burritos to their place and got swept up in the dragnet. But anyway, so there's this guy named Jashanpreet Singh, and here's a picture of him. So Mr. Singh is all of 21 years old, and he plowed into a line of stopped cars in, we'll call it Rancho Cucamonga the other day. And he basically didn't even hit the brakes. But it turns out he was like under the influence of drugs when he did it. And, he ended up killing 3 people, injuring a bunch more, involved several four-wheelers and I think three other semis. One of the semis that was involved, because I saw the dash cam video from his truck, one of the semis that was involved was just a dude in a day cab that was like broke down on the side of the road and getting some road service. And this clown Singh plowed into the cab of the truck that was broke down that had its hood popped up. So apparently Singh got his license in California, and he came across the border on some kind of sketch-ass visa. I don't know exactly, tourist visa maybe. And, for a lot of things going on here. 21-year-old. And here's the thing. A lot of these guys, and somebody talked about making it a requirement that somebody has a regular driver's license for a year before they get a CDL. And I totally agree with that. But I also totally agree with the idea that people that are from like flipping South Florida who've never driven in the snow and then they get a CDL and a trucking company says, yeah, hey, go up to Minnesota in January and pick this load up. That's irresponsible on the part of the trucking company, but they do it. Like I was sitting in a loading dock in Denver one time, Commerce, Colorado, and it was like winter, like January or something. And the dude I was sitting next to said he started his trucking career at Saya as a pickup and delivery driver in like basically New Orleans. And he said he had never driven in snow before he got his CDL. And I was like, man, this is a hard way to learn in a semi. It's a hard way to learn how to drive in snow. But anyway, this Singh guy, 21 years old, under the influence, somehow got his license in California. And I say somehow, I don't know that the California DMV did anything wrong. There are laws, and as long as somebody meets the requirements, they get the license, right? That's how it is a lot of places. And, it's kind of like one time I was on an airplane and this dude got a wheelchair to the door of the plane, then limped, hobbled, just old guy, grossly out of shape, way overweight, hobbles down and gets in the exit row seat. And I'm in the aisle of the aisle seat on the exit row, overwing exit. And they come down and they're like, hey, can you perform the operations of doing this like in the event of an emergency? And I'm like, yeah, I can do it. I can do it in the dark. But I said to the flight attendant, I said, hey, this dude had to get a wheelchair to come on this plane. and he's saying yes, he can do this, and she goes, if they say yes, I can't make a move. If they say they can do it, I can't make a move. And I said, okay, well, if for some reason we do have an emergency, I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick that guy up and throw him over the seats. And then I'm going to pull the piece of the fuselage out and put it down so people can escape. And back then I could have done that. But so anyway, sometimes, states may not want to issue a license, but the person meets all the requirements. And I've said, if you want change, you got to change the laws. But here's the problem I have with, like, going back to the ELP legislation, where every state would have to administer like thousands and thousands of tests every year, right? Licensure, motor vehicle licensure, is a state level operation of government. It always has been. Never ever have there been federal, and I recognize there's a few exceptions to this, but basically if you want to drive, no 16-year-old says, I got to go to the federal building to get my permit, and then I'm going to go back and get my federal driver's license. It's not a thing. There are certain things that the federal government has never really gotten involved in. Now, there's federal oversight of the transportation industry, but licensure, that's a whole different kettle of fish. And I don't think none of these chuckleheads in Congress are going to allocate the money to, pay states to do this testing. And you may have heard this in other contexts where they say, hey, there's a mandate without an appropriation. In other words, the federal government's telling the states to do something, but they aren't giving them the money to make it happen. So that brings us to, and by the way, there was somebody from the administration talking about, the reason Singh here crashed his truck is because California has shitty slack laws or whatever, basically. Like, it's all California's fault. But here's the problem with that. Texas has had all sorts of chicanery around their driver's license issuance for CDLs. There have been scams there. There have been people that have taken bribes. It's well documented. It's well documented in Florida. It's well documented in Illinois. It's well documented in Massachusetts, right? In Massachusetts, we had cops, like state troopers, that were taking bribes, right? The whole system is flawed. And maybe this does cry out for federal CDL issuance, but you got to be willing to create a new federal bureaucracy to do all this. And I doubt that the Republicans in Congress are ever going to create this enormous thing, like you federalize all these people that work at DMVs or add new offices. It's not going to happen. All this is just cheap talk. It's not going to happen. And I don't even know that the rule that basically said no more non-domiciled CDL holders, I don't know if that rule is going to pass judicial review, because there are lawsuits about it already. But the second guy I want to tell you about, if these chuckleheads at the state and federal level had listened to Terry, had listened to Tim Travels, sorry, this might have been prevented. So this guy, I'm going to show you a picture in a second. His name is Borko Stankovic, or maybe it's Broko. The article didn't say, but here's a picture of him. Now, let's be honest. He looks a lot more like me than Mr. Singh does. But here's the deal with Borko. He not only is in this country illegally from Eastern Europe, and I can't remember exactly what country. It might have been Ukraine, might have been Moldova, but it doesn't really matter. He's in this country illegally. He had a wreck the other day in Indiana that killed a person, where he basically jackknifed his truck, and part of the truck went across the center line and killed this guy that was in his, I think, early 50s. But here's the deal with Stankovic. He not only, this is crazy, but he was driving on an expired CDL that belongs to a family member. In other words, he doesn't even have a CDL. So you know damn right well he doesn't have a medical card, right? This guy was illegal, 110% illegal. And he's here. Oh, by the way, he also defrauded the federal government out of like $36,000 in PPP, paycheck protection funds during COVID. And you know, it was crazy. Again, like this accident happened in Indiana, near Portage, Indiana, on US 20, road I've driven before. And you know, the politicking around this was ridiculous. But here's what I would say to all those Indiana officials that want to blame this on the Biden administration, right? And when are you going to start own it? You know, it's like when a captain says, I assume command, man, if that ship blows up 5 seconds later, it's on him, right? When are people going to start owning it? And here's the thing about Stankovich, which is even different than Singh, is I've said this before and I'll say it again. If they would conduct mass traffic stops, just like block highways and check every single driver, check them for ELP, check them for valid driver's license, valid CDL, check them for valid medical card, and then impound the vehicles and take people into custody. And I don't care what it costs, because if you say you're serious about this problem, then you would just make that happen. The federal government would cough up all the money necessary to have, oh, I forgot to, did I show Stankovich's picture? Yeah, I think I did. But the federal government, okay, sorry about that. I just want to make sure I was doing this right. So yeah, the federal government needs to just cough up the money, right? Like if this is that big of a deal, if people, and by the way, Stankovich has been in this country illegally for like 11 years. This is how crazy the whole system is. He overstayed a tourist visa, just starts setting up companies in the United States and applied for that PPP loan. Like nobody is checking anything. And that did happen during the Biden administration. There was a lot of fraud around it. And it's not just him, it's people that are allowed to be in this country. But the whole thing is just crazy, right? And you know, if the federal government, you know, I was thinking about this when I was showering earlier, and I was thinking about this, and I was like, man, I could think of a few locations on I-81, where you could just put up a sign, have some state troopers out there and say, and near Lexington actually, where there's huge shoulders, and just be like, every semi, I want you in the right-hand lane. Any semi that wasn't in the right-hand lane when they got to a certain point automatically is getting a ticket for disobeying a road sign. And they're getting pulled over and they're getting inspected. And I don't care what it takes, because if it's not worth doing, you know, if you can't, as a politician, you can't say, yeah, we're going to have to do this, right? Because it is out of control. And I've said that before. It's out of control. It's a different issue with the cabotage with the Canadians, but there are so many things on the road that are out of control. And why is that? It's because when the cat's away, the mice will play. And the cat has been asleep at the switch, right? It's like if you said, "Hey, we're not going to have any law enforcement in this town." Well, eventually, you know, criminals are going to find out about that and they're going to take advantage of it. And right now, I don't know, but other than actual, like, well, trucking is full of organized crime. If you talk about organized theft rings, you talk about trucking companies that are running illegally, and it's like their company policy. You look at even companies that you would think would do things legally, right? Like Triton, you know, they were having, like, you know, ghost drivers and stuff. That's not just a problem like with one driver trying to, like, you know, run for 20 hours straight. That's a conspiracy to violate federal law. And no one's going to jail. Nobody's trucks are getting taken away. Nobody's ending up in handcuffs. And until that happens, like, look at, I look at like the mob in the 70s. Until RICO came around and they started wiretapping these guys and started, like, putting people in prison for the rest of their lives, nothing changed. And eventually it changed. And by the way, they used RICO on, street gangs. They used RICO on cartels. They used RICO on Eastern European organized crime. And that's what needs to happen in trucking. Because right now, there is organized crime in trucking. And it's not the mob, like it's not the La Cosa Nostra. It's just illegal operations. There are conspiracies to operate illegally. And, we all know this, right? It's kind of like New York in the 70s, right? Like, people knew the mob was around, right? They knew if there was a garbage hauler, chances are they were hooked up with the mob or some concrete company or some carpenters union or whatever, right? It's no different today. It's just organized crime in a different way. And honestly, there are people getting killed all the time on U.S. highways because of this organized crime. And all these politicians want to point fingers, but nobody wants to do anything about it. They're like, oh yeah, we're going to test everybody. So what? I mean, think about it. Who cares? First of all, I don't think that's going to happen, because how are you going to implement it? And I said this to somebody months ago when they talked about first doing this. Yeah, they've taken, 4,000 people out of service over the last 6 months. Who gives a crap, right? That's nothing. It's nothing. And what does out of service mean? You take a freaking Duolingo class while you're waiting at the way station? No, you drive away, you ride away with somebody. But I guarantee that person that was out of service, they're back on the road within hours. Nothing got fixed. It's like saying, hey, you were running a Shylock business. You were running, making illegal loans and, but locking somebody up for 15 minutes and letting them go and not taking their money, not taking their assets. Just be like, hey, you can't have that anymore. That's what's going on. And I don't care what political persuasion you are. If you don't think that it's important to, go full bore on this, then I don't really want to hear what the politicians from your side of the aisle say about this. And by the way, this, I think just the two pictures I showed of two people that are, one is just here illegally for years, and the other guy is probably here legally, but probably should have never had a license. They don't look alike. And while I know that a lot of people think that there's a racial component to this, there's not. In fact, I would say, hey, look, start with everybody that looks like me, because I've seen people that look like me, that talk like me, but I guarantee some portion of this group is running without a valid CDL, is running without a valid medical card, is running without insurance. Maybe they could speak English, but they still should be off the road. I mean, look, you can take me to a truck stop, and if there's 100 guys parked at that truck stop and 80 and 100 of them look like me, I guarantee somebody is running illegal there. And if they're running illegally, then they're harming people that are doing it correctly, that are running legal, they don't use ghost drivers. They have valid CDLs. They have valid medical cards. They have insurance. There's tread on the tires of their truck, whatever it is, right? And it's high time that we get to a point where we say, hey, we're not going to accept criminality in this industry because it's costing us money. It's risking our lives and the lives of anybody else who drives, but it's also harming the economy. I mean, there are billions and billions of dollars of cargo that's stolen every year. It drives up the cost for everybody. When these clowns wipe out, 8 cars and 3 trucks and a pileup, it drives everybody's insurance rates up. It harms all of us. So, call your congressman, call your senator, call your state representatives, tell them quit blaming other states and do, I don't want to hear somebody blame California. I want to hear somebody say, oh, you know what we're going to do? We're going to fund a dragnet on California highways. Hell, come up with U.S. Department of Transportation police. We got enough federal law enforcement as it is. Just make a few more of them. Just send them out in teams. And they can operate in any state. Just put them on the road. Stopping trucks, looking at credentials, arresting people and impounding vehicles that aren't credentialed properly. So anyway, talk to you soon. Bye.